Hey everyone, Andrig with Andrig's Aircooled technology. Wanted to create a video for installation of the new fixed position cooling flaps that I have coming out probably later today. So for OEM fan shrouds, which I have here in the background, I already have, I have them, the flaps sitting in there. They're not screwed in place, but you can kind of see there. Obviously, we just put them in. I put the screws in place. The only thing I wanted to point out in terms of these is on the 1-2 cylinder side, the holes for the screws are a slot really, not just a round hole on the furthest outside one. So I'm gonna remove this one from the 3/4 cylinder side. I'm just gonna show you, hopefully pretty easily here, what you really want to do here in terms of lining this up is, if you can kind of see the slotted hole, you want to line up the screw and the nut there on the back of that to the upper part of the hole. The reason that those slots are there is really for the thermostat, being able to make the thermostat easier to install. You'll be able to pull that rod down far enough where you can screw on the thermostat underneath, and so you know that gives you some wiggle room. You can kind of pull that whole assembly down if you need to get the thing threaded on there, and then once it's on there, you'll want to lock these in place if you have a thermostat, right? So but that gives the proper angle for installation if you align it towards the top. So just kind of center it at the top and you'll be good. So that's really all that's really required on an OEM fan shroud. There's also a fan shroud which I was just recently became aware of, which was a Concept 1. Not really sure who that is and hadn't done a lot of research on it, but looking at the pictures of it online, it actually mimics the OEM fan shroud in the same way. It has the same curves here. It has the proper way of doing an outlet for heat. It actually has the holes for thermostat flaps, which is kind of interesting. So that reproduction fan shroud is a good choice because you don't need to modify it in any way. I'm not really sure how good it is otherwise, but it looks like it's a very good reproduction of the original OEM. So that's an option for anybody that's looking for fan shrouds, and you wouldn't have to modify it. Now this is the most common fan shroud on the market, the 36 horsepower style. They're really nicer looking, right? And of course this has no heater stuff, and actually I'd really only recommend these fan shrouds for people who are not running the heater anyway, because when they modify these for the heater, all they really do is cut a hole in here and stick a little tube on there. And it's not really proper the way that this is angled to smooth the airflow and get the airflow coming through. It's just really a right angle outlet. So that's kind of unfortunate that they do that, but that's what they do, and it's simple, right? You can make basically one basic fan shroud and then just have a simple modification for heat, but probably doesn't work that well, although if you have one out there and it's working for you, great. The other thing I wanted to point out is a couple of things that are different about these fan shrouds as well before we get into modifying this, is the width of these is slightly smaller than the width of an OEM fan shroud. They're 3 millimeters shorter in terms of width. So 1.5 millimeters on each side. That's not very much. Probably don't notice it that much when you install it in terms of other tin wear, but it is a little bit narrower, and so the templates for modifying, putting these screw holes in the right place actually has to take that into account. The other thing is this underneath portion right here. I'm going to show you here. Right here, this is the 1-2 cylinder side. Right here, this area is actually significantly longer than it is on the OEM fan shroud, and so it has to be trimmed back. So one of the templates I'm going to show you is actually meant to trim this back, because you essentially can't fit this in place in the right spot because of that. You can kind of see this overlaps with that, and so you end up with a problem in terms of that. So one of the templates is to trim this back properly so we can install the flaps in there without this getting in the way. So why they did that, not really sure. It actually is somewhat creating a little bit more of a restriction on this side of the fan shroud by doing that, so it's actually good to remove it anyway. So that's the differences between them. So we're going to push this OEM one aside. I'm going to show you, these are the production flaps right here, fixed flaps right here. This one is for the 1-2 cylinder side. This one is for the 3-4 cylinder side. So 3-4 cylinder side is left, 1-2 cylinder side is right on the engine. So that's, and of course you left and right, front and back on a car is always based on the orientation of the driver. So, so even what a lot of people would consider the front of the fan shroud is actually considered the back. I won't confuse people with that in this video. We'll try to keep it alternator generator side, inlet side, air inlet side, to keep it easier to remember so people don't have to remember that. So there's the what they look like. Here's the templates right here. There's 5 templates, 2 for the 1-2 cylinder side, 2 for the 3-4 cylinder side. These are the 3-4 cylinder side templates, and you can actually tell they look on the surface to be identical to each other. They're not. They are identical in one aspect, and the holes are lined up in the exact same spot. As you can see here, you can line up the holes, but the lengths are different. And the reason the lengths are different is the shorter one is used for the backside of the fan shroud, and the longer one is used for, I shouldn't say that, the backside. Because it's actually the front side. See, I'm doing the same thing, getting them confused. For the inlet side of the fan shroud, this one, the shorter one, and the longer one is for the alternator generator side of the fan shroud. We have the same thing on the other side, 1-2 cylinder side. They look very close to each other. These are easier to tell apart. The one that goes on the inlet side has this cutout right here, and it has kind of a cutout where it's like half width. If you can see that well. Well, this one doesn't, and it's a little longer. So those are easy to tell apart, and I'll explain kind of that in a moment. And then of course we have this, which is for trimming that thing, the tin on the inside, a little easier. So very, very quickly, on the back side, or really the front side, I'm doing it again, the air inlet side of the fan shroud. This is where they seam and put it together, right? So this is actually tack welded across this seam, and that's why it has to be shorter. Let me raise that up a little bit. That's why it has to be shorter, because of this right here, to get these things in the exact same position. So this is what we want here, is to have this positioned right so that they'll match up with the other side. So that's why that's like that. And of course we'll take the shorter one, and it'll go like so, lined up. So we got the curve on the raised portion. This is the portion that fits in down here, right here. It fits into the cylinder tin, and this, essentially is sealing that off. And so we can just butt that against both the curve and the side here, the sheet metal side, and that's how we line up the back side. On the front side, or I shouldn't say the back side, front side, keep doing that. On the alternator generator side, the longer template is used, and we're going to line it up very similar. We're going to do right here, but we're going to do it where we make sure that this outside is lined up and square with the flat of the shroud. That way we get the proper alignment back to front with the holes. So we're gonna talk about next what you need to do this besides the templates. Oh, let me show the trim template as well. real quick. So the trim template just lines up right here with the edge of that sheet metal underneath, and then it gives you essentially where you can scribe, or I'll just use a marker on doing this, and we will you know, cut back according to where we draw that line right there. So what do we need to get this done besides the templates? And of course the product itself. We'll need some kind of punch, and these holes are designed for one of these automatic punches in terms of the size of the holes. So you can center your drill. We'll need some kind of marker or a scribe. You can have something like you can just scratch in to draw a line. Some kind of clamp. I have this kind of clamp, but you could use vice grips as well. A lot of people have vice grips, so this clamp is a little easier to use than vice grips. But and then of course drill bits. And in this particular case, we need. I've got here my little right angle drill that I use because it's nice to just hold it in your hand. This is a 2.5 millimeter drill bit as a starting point. You want to create a small hole to start with, because if you don't create a small hole, well, you know, it's very easy for large bits to walk and not be able to stay centered where you have the punch mark, right? Even though it's a little indentation. So these, you know, small bit like this, the tip will fit right into that indentation and won't walk on you. And you'll be able to drill that first pilot hole, and then be able to go to the larger one. Then you'll need, the holes are actually 7 millimeter in size. So I'm not really sure what that translates into if you don't have metric drill bits. I would invest in a set of metric drill bits to do this, because it's just accurate for one thing. You don't have to worry about the hole being too big or too small or whatever. So 7 millimeters, and actually I broke my 7 millimeter drill bit. This is a 6.5 millimeter drill bit that I'm going to use today. But just know that the holes are really 7 millimeter, and I'm waiting for my replacement 7 millimeter drill bit to arrive. So that's the tools that you need, and of course you need the hardware. I'm not shipping the kit with hardware, but obviously it will take the standard hardware. You can buy these, you know, at lots of places. This is the standard, you know, slotted screw. These are 6 millimeter by 1 millimeter thread screws, but they have that tapered end, which makes them a little easier to kind of get in and out. And then of course we also have, in the same tapered style as the stock ones, we have these stainless steel ones that are socket head style. CB Performance sells these. They sell the original slotted ones, but you can probably find them anywhere. Even maybe if you have a local part shop, they should have these in stock. If not, one of these two in stock. I kind of like these. They're a little nicer looking to me. And of course, you could use any 6 millimeter by 1 millimeter thread, you know, bolt. Just make sure they're the right length. These are pretty short, and of course with a washer. So if you want, so anything that you get there, you can do. That's what you really need to get this thing done. And I'm going to transition into, I'm going to put one of the templates on, and we'll come back once I've kind of got template on and holes drilled, and you can kind of see how that works, clamped in place. And then we'll, you know, and it's just repeating that procedure for each template, and then we'll come back and do the tin snip stuff. That's the other thing I don't have right here in front of me, the tin snip, but I'll get some tin snips, or you could use a grinder or a Dremel tool, or anything that you can cut that sheet metal back with. So that's where we are with that, and I'll be back in a minute once I have the template kind of in place. I don't want to bore you with all the fiddling. All right, thanks. We'll be back. Okay, I'm back with the first template put in place. I'm just going to repeat this process and see kind of how I have it lined up. Have it against the raised edge of this and lined up square with the outside of the fan shroud, and then clamped in place. I've already used the punch on this particular hole, on the inside hole, and we're going to use the punch. Hopefully you can kind of at least see what I'm doing here. My punch is a little finicky. Okay, so that's what we're doing right there. Once we have those in place, we can release the clamp, take the template off, and now what you'll have is, hopefully I can get it where you can see those things. Let's see. See those things? There's a little punch mark right there, a little punch mark right there. That's what you're after. Then we can use our drill to drill the pilot holes. We're just going to center the tip of the drill bit right in that. Drill through. Same thing with the other. Drill through there, and then we'll have our nice pilot holes in the right spot. Should be able to see that fairly well. So we got our pilot holes in the right spot. This is where then we're going to open up and drill larger holes. So we're going to switch out our drill bit. You see how easy that was to keep it centered with the small drill bit, because this drill bit really fits right into that indentation that's made by the punch very, very easily. So the drill bit doesn't walk. You just start it nice and easy, and you'll be good. Now we go to our larger drill bit. Finish those holes off and just make sure we don't, do anything with getting that drill bit going through the other side. Just make sure we don't hit the other side. We do this. There we go. And these are a little bit small, but you can see got the holes in the appropriate place. If you had a little bit of a file, whatever, you could clean up the back side of those holes, but that's really how we use the templates. Same thing for the other side over here. The back side I do want to show, or the air inlet side, I do want to show this template and why it is the kind of the way it is. Got the reliefs on it. You're going to put that relief side is going to go against the fan shroud right in here, right like that. You can kind of see why that relief cut is there. It's there for this sheet metal, so you can stay flat and you can clamp it in place, as well as a cutout for this area, which is for directing air over to your oil cooler. Right, so that's why that one is the way it is, and we just line it up the same way. We butt it against the sheet metal right here because we have something to butt against, and we'll have holes that line up. So that gives you that whole thing with how that works. I'll finish this and I'll show you the finished product in a bit. But I talked about the template for trimming back the sheet metal on the inside. And so I'm going to put it in place like I already illustrated. And in this case, I'm going to use my marker. And I'm just using a Sharpie here. Use something that's a color that you can see pretty easily against a black background. I mean, this is not the perfect one, it's green, but it still shows up good enough that you can kind of see what you're doing. And that'll give you a line. I don't know if you can really see that on the video or not. Give you a line here to cut back to. You could use tin snips like this. You can use a Dremel, something small that you can get in there with it. And I'll do that and show you the results. So we'll be back in a minute after I finish all the other stuff. We'll have the whole thing done and I'll show you what it looks like. And then we'll put the flaps in place and mount them and see how they work. Okay, I've got all the holes drilled save one because I wanted to show you this and why it's tricky and why it's really important to start with that 2.5 millimeter drill bit. So here on the air inlet side of the fan shroud, you know, I've got the holes drilled. Actually already have the 3/4 cylinder side in place because there's no extra trimming to be done. And this little hole right there, see, it overlaps this sheet metal. On the OEM sheet metal, this actually has a little cutout right here because it needs that hole right there. So in this particular case, that doesn't have that since it wasn't designed for the flaps to be in there. So that hole, is like right on towards the edge of this, and there's no cutout or relief here like it is in the OEM. So really important to have that. 2.5 millimeters is about the biggest drill bit you could use. You could go smaller, like 2 millimeters. I wouldn't go smaller than 2 millimeters. The drill bits become very easy to break, and the sheet metal is harder than you think in terms of drilling through it. So I wanted to make sure to point out the fact that there's that overlap. That's why the template is designed the way it is as well, and that hole is going to end up right on the edge of that. So without a good pilot hole that just sits on top of this, if you're trying to straddle that, you'll never get a hole that's in the right spot. So just wanted to point that out, and then we'll be back with the finished product here in a bit. Okay, everybody, we're back with the finished product. You can see here. I'm going to point out a couple other little things, but essentially this is what it should look like, and I'm using the CB Performance instead of the regular screws in most of the places here, but you'll see how that's nice and lined up on both sides, pretty easy. The trim piece here, let's see if we can see that good. I'll turn it the other way where we trim that back so this can fit, and there's the proper air fitting there. A couple things here. I use the tin snips, and I did end up using this little carbide bit to kind of smooth things off, but the tin snips worked well in terms of kind of getting it mostly back. Where I needed to kind of grind back is right on the sides, okay? On the sides here, so that this will fit in there flat, since there's some sheet metal right here that runs along there. And that was pretty much a straightforward thing. The other thing to point out that's tricky, I already pointed this out, is this hole right here. It didn't look like it lined up at all. It won't probably look like it lines up when you first drill this hole, even though it does line up perfectly in terms of both sides are the same, because when you start to drill on this, it's so close to the edge with your larger drill bit, the drill bit will walk kind of in this, kind of this direction right here. And so your hole ends up being slightly offset. So you can just use a larger drill bit, or just use the same drill bit, or even the little carbide kind of grinding bit, anything you have there to kind of elongate the hole back in the other direction, so that, so you'll make this hole will be slightly larger than it will be for the other ones, but that's perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with that. Still, this washer is a good 10 millimeters, right? So you can kind of elongate that hole as you need to, but that's the only thing that really is a little bit more tricky. And of course, you'll want to do this on a fan shroud that's, that you're going to want to probably either repaint or powder coat or whatever afterwards, because you'll scratch it up probably in places as you do this. If you're super careful, you won't, but you can kind of see, I kind of scratch a little bit there, and in some other places there's a couple little spots where I kind of scratched it up. I scratched it up right there with the drill by accident, so the kind of minor touch-ups you could do also, but if you're already gonna have it powder coated or repainted to be nice, different color, especially whatever, do this first and then you'll be fine. And then that's your finished product, and it'll work really well. One other last tidbit to point out is, these, obviously this is all steel. They've been epoxy powder coated, so you don't have to do anything to them in terms of they won't rust or anything like that. But obviously these air deflectors, they're just 22 gauge steel. So you drop the thing, you kind of handle it too rough or whatever, you can actually bend these things pretty easily, because it is just really thin steel. But that's that's the way the standard ones are too. So you just be a little careful as you handle them. It's not like they're fragile or anything like that. But you can bend them, and of course if you do bend them, it is mild steel. So if you got if you got a good flat surface, you can probably get them straight and where they belong again without too much. As long as you don't break apart a weld or anything like that, you should be fine. And of course when you install this on with these in place, you should be careful as you lower it down over the oil cooler, etc., and get it on your engine, that you're not like hitting these things on stuff hard or anything. So you don't want all of a sudden it's like you got a bent curl on a corner or an edge or something like that. But other than that, there you go. Beautiful aftermarket 36 horsepower doghouse fan shroud mattified with the cooling flaps in place. It's not that difficult to do, but take your time. Make sure you have those templates really lined up super well. So you get, the holes will be beautifully lined up. Even with the smaller, I used the 6.5mm drill bit. These lined up beautifully, right? So no issues with that. The 7mm gives you a little bit more wiggle room in terms of, if you get a template slightly off or whatever. Obviously on the inlet side of the fan shroud, the templates, they butt up against that, steel sheet metal, and so they're easier to get them aligned properly. And you just want to make sure that the templates don't ride up on the raised area. So you don't want them riding up on top of that. It should be up against it, but not over it in any way. And so once you have them lined up in the right place, get your spots punched, you'll be good. So relatively straightforward, and should be able to do it first time without issue. I think, because really was pretty simple. So just make sure you got the right tools, and you're ready to go, and go for it. And I think you'll be good. So appreciate all of the time watching this, and appreciate the business, especially as we come down to the end of the year. Things have gotten better for Andrig's Aircooled technology. Hopefully they'll continue to get better as I continue to release new products. But your support's been great, keeping us kind of afloat and going through this kind of odd period that we're in. Really appreciate that. Thank you guys, and hope you enjoy this product. I think you'll like it. I will probably be doing something special in terms of towards the end of the year for pricing for some of my products. So stay tuned for that as well. Talk to you later, guys.